We are live. Hello and welcome to Community Manager Live. I'm David Dewald, Community Manager at Sienna and a media guy at communitymanager.com. Each week, we bring together a collection of community professionals to discuss a topic suggested by you, our audience. If you would like to chat along with us today, you can join us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch, where we can pull your questions in live. LinkedIn is now available as an option, and we'll pull them into the stream and show them to everybody. If you prefer to watch or listen, you can do so on Twitter. You can find all of those links at the top of the page on communitymanager.com. And I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, Tim McDonald, briefly so that he can get everybody introed.
Well, thank you, David. And it's so great to be here. I'm Tim McDonald. I am David's co-host of Community Manager Live here every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time in the U.S. And today we are so excited to have Deb Schell and Venia with us back. And so, Deb, why don't you just introduce yourself really quick? Tell us, who you are, where you're at, and what you do briefly, and then you can throw it over to Venia.
Sure. Yeah, I am a community consultant, and I help business owners build, launch, and grow online communities by finding calm through the process. I teach the CALM method of clarity, awareness, learning, and motion, and that's how I work with clients. And I've been a community manager and a community consultant for 2 years, and I am excited to be here. I'm calling in from Central Pennsylvania. Venia, where are you in the world? I forget.
Yeah, I am in an absolutely rough and tumble, unfortunately super bad raining right now, Fort Collins, Colorado. Absolutely gorgeous, but sometimes the weather's a bit crazy on the mountain. So I actually just started a consultancy and e-course training myself called sociallyconstructed.online. And if it sounds a bit academic, that's exactly the point, because I build online communities using social scientific principles in order to help brands build robust communities, seat community managers, and then mentor those community managers to level up skills.
That's so much better than the way I do it. I just, build it and they come.
Oh, you lucky.
No, I do just wing it most of the time, though. No, I'm kidding.
It was always that easy, right?
That's right. All right. So what we do is we're gonna pop a question up on screen. There's just a few of us today, which is good. It'll keep it tight, and everybody will have a chance to speak as long as they want. We won't feel rushed for time. Those questions will appear above our heads and scroll along. That way, if you've come late or like me, you go off topic, it's right there to remind you what you should be talking about. So our first question: when you first joined or created your community, how did you initiate the relationship building?
What's the word? How did you what? How did you?
When you first joined or created your community, how did you initiate the relationship building? And that can be between you and the community to the community. It's kind of out there either way.
Initiate conversations in community. I always kick off with. Initiate, I don't know.
Initiate the relationship building. How did you kind of nurture?
Initiate relationship building.
Yeah.
Typically for me, it looks like a welcome party. And we celebrate by connecting with each other and welcome each other in during a virtual call, where I do a celebration around thanks for coming here, arriving. We have a live call and do some breakout rooms to get with a little juicy icebreaker question to build relationships with people. That's a tactical way, but basically overall, I would just say, how do we create connection between individuals? If you find the common thread, find what connects us. We all came together here for a reason. What's that reason? So Tim has something I feel like he has to say.
Well, I just love that you said that, because I remember back when social media first came about and everybody used to say, I don't want to see pictures of your food. I don't want to see what your family is like. It's like everybody wanted to, think it was just for business and we need to market on there. And I came up in sales, and it was always about like, you look and see back in the day when you were able to smoke in offices, what kind of cigarettes or cigars were in the ashtray. You'd look at the diploma on their wall. If they had trophies, what books were on their bookshelf. And so when you said common threads that we have, it was all about like making that connection of what could you talk about before you got into business, right? And so when we look at doing this in communities, I think it's, you know, especially when you're first starting one, I think the most important thing is to actually listen and research about people. I used to say, and I still do say, that I am a lurker at heart. But I'm not the creepy kind. I'm the friendly kind of lurker, you know, and but because I like to get to know people, I dig into their links that they have on their profiles. I see what they've recently posted and shared about. So when I first make that contact with them, I actually have something that I'm relating to them that's of interest to them, letting them know that I took the time to get to know about them before I just wanted to get something out of them.
Yeah, and kind of building off of that, I'm going to do the thing I'm famous for. I also feel like it's super critical and important to recognize how the cigarettes in the ashtray and the books and the photographs on the office desk translate into virtual spaces. Because when you're talking about an anthropology of virtual worlds, right, you are transferring a life, and work is not all that exists in your life. You know, there's this understanding that, especially on Zoom calls, a lot of people in their work have felt isolated during COVID precisely because they don't have those "how are you" kind of conversations, and they don't have those conversations about what's going on in the background because they have this virtual clipping thing happening, right? But it's really about that authenticity, that transparency, and that recognition for, I am a person with an idea.
All right, we're back. Sorry about that.
Did something happen? The restream is just bouncing between all of us.
Yeah,
we're good. We're good.
Yeah, but kind of to get back on track, what I was saying was, like, there's a big difference between the structured communication of a community where you're like, this is how we're going to talk, this is what we're going to talk about, these are the topical sentences. But it's also just as important for you to focus on and build the unstructured conversation in your community, because that's how people move into a breadth of topic. That's how people connect and learn more about each other. You're never going to get self-disclosure if you just focus on those hyper-specific work-related concepts. It just doesn't work that way. So focus on Grapevine as much as you do structured communication.
Very good. I don't think I can add anything. I mean, I'm like Tim. I go in and I kind of sit back and get the lay of the land, and then from there I'll do things to get to know the community and to, you know, help nurture, you know, between each other. I tend to do support communities and B2B communities. So oftentimes, if somebody asks a question and I know somebody that has an answer, I'll kind of tag them in a way, and then that's kind of an intro. So, you know, it's saying, I'm not the expert here. This guy is an expert, and it kind of introduces in this way and defers it to him. But no, I think it's the best way.
Yeah. Now I will say this, just because I wasn't sure if it was a question coming up, but I peeked just to make sure I wasn't going to take an answer away from there. But one thing that I have also done is, you know, when I do searching for people, like especially to bring into the community, it's all about like the same type of principle, you know, not just people in your community, but people that you want to get into your community, really doing the same thing with them. And sometimes, you know, I remember when I was at HuffPost, right? I mean, very liberal media organization, and trying to get different voices in and going with the more conservative crowd was always a challenge. But if I paid attention and I did everything that all of us have talked about, it made it much easier for them to take me seriously than to just think I was trying to bring them in to put them on the fire and burn them. You know, it was all about, like, we already had kind of a relationship built. So I think it's important both internally and as you're bringing people in to really focus on all these things that we've discussed in this first question already.
All right. Our second question: what tools or techniques have helped you manage connections and milestones as your community grows?
Ooh, I could go into a lot of tools. Venya, do you have any go-to tools that you want to share before I?
Oh, I kind of feel like that's like the question of the hour in community management, right? Like, what platforms can we use to have interpersonal discussions at scale, right? And that's the big thing. I love using different social listening tools. The community intelligence platform has become like this new big thing now, Common Room and Orbit. But I also really like just sticking with Notifier.so and with Medallia, both very, very interesting and useful social listening tools that you can turn inward onto your inner community just as well as you can discuss on social media and stuff like that. So I primarily use a lot of social listening tools. The social currency metric system is something that I built myself to essentially allow me to classify and codify sentiment analysis for that social learning. And it's kind of using that where I can be like, okay, what's this fire hose of conversation looking like? Who should I connect to who about what topics, and what content should I be using in order to immortalize that discussion? So that's how I would do it. Just social listening and sentiment analysis tools.
I think technique wise, I think it's helpful to, the better as a community manager, the better that you know your members, the more you can understand and kind of keep track on who's doing what or who knows things and how to connect those people to new members as they join. I think as somebody who's been in a community, I try to keep tabs on people who I want, and I follow them, like just by just subscribing, if there's like a profile way to follow them, something like that. Also just asking my own questions and then seeing who pops in and shares is something that I like as a technique to see where everybody's at. Sometimes it's good to have just a quick, post to say, how's everybody at? Where are you at in your journey? Are you, at the beginning of this thing? Are you, if it's a way to, if we can all relate in the stages, I think those are different ways to kind of see where we are at, and then who are like the leads or the champions in this space versus like the newbies that are just kind of coming in. It gives us like an entry point to connect to. But I think those are a couple different techniques that I've used as far as, keeping tabs on my members as well as like getting to know new members. Tim is like with bated breath over there.
I always probably have something to add in, but I think, for me, I don't really focus too much on the tool as much as, what we do with it. And so for me, it's really about like looking at, and celebrating, especially like milestones, like paying attention if your tool tells you like the anniversary date of when somebody joined, and celebrating that in the community with that person. When I was at HuffPost, we had guests. And so like if they were on maybe their 10th segment, it was like, hey, you've been on 10 segments with us, which was a lot, in the first year, to be on. And so it was always about like kind of celebrating the community member in that. But I think, the other thing that's important too is to understand that sometimes, and this is what I've found, is the most valuable relationships that I've built in the community, and especially as one grows, is by not having the conversation in the community with that person. It's actually having the conversation outside. And so for me, a lot of times that was my cell phone. And I always joke in a lot of talks I give that I have the latest, greatest piece of technology that, get ready to write it down, it's called your cell phone, right? And it's like picking it up and actually talking to somebody, because you don't get to do that a lot of times. I mean, we get to type and chat and tweet and, whatever, but we don't actually get to hear our voices. And so that was one thing that I just found so powerful. And I think it shows the level of trust that you have in your community member when you're willing to give them your cell phone number. And that gives them carte blanche to be able to call and text you whenever they want. And for me, that's like, I never looked at that as like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen if I do this? Because I just saw the opportunity here. And it just created such strong relationships with those very valuable, I didn't do this to every community member, right? But like the very valuable community members that were contributing more, that were influencing other community members in your community. It was really about having that trust, having that open dialogue with them off platform, that allowed me to not be the center of the community and allowed them to go back into the community, really share what we as an organization were looking to do from our perspective, but in their voice. And that never would have happened if I tried to just do that in the community publicly. And so, I mean, I think that, you know, when we talk about this, it's like sometimes we always think about the bigger we get, the less personal contact we can have. And I kind of look at it the opposite way. I kind of flip it 180 degrees. It's like the bigger we get, the more one-on-one connections we can have with that select group of people that can influence many people, makes our job so much easier.
Yeah. And
mic drop.
Yeah, I mean,
it was really, really good. And as you're talking about it, all it reminds me of is in marketing, we have a socio-ecological scale, right? And the socio-ecological scale is essentially this thing that was made by Urie Bronfenbrenner that says something very obvious. Society can be divided into specific stages or scopes where conversations change and the way that they converse can be studied within that scope separately. So the first scope is intrapersonal, what's going on in your head, and that's psychology. And then there's interpersonal conversation, followed by small group, how you interact with your friends, your family members, or your local department heads. And then there's an inner community, your inner department in your organization, followed by your organization is this next up scope. The wider community, how your organization and you interact with the wider community. And then at the top is law and the internet and code, right? And they essentially percolate down to discuss where things are. And the reason I bring this up is because in marketing, you can define marketing as trying to have as many conversations as low on the scale as possible, while still having a reach as high as possible. And the way that I see it, you have marketing covering like the top half of that socio-ecological scale, right? You're trying to have these conversations. And then sales is down here, and community management covers the gap between the scopes of your wider community, your intra-organizational community, and then those interpersonal conversations. And I feel like it's that exact process where you, Tim, are saying, as you scale, you gain more capacity to speak lower down on the socio-ecological scale.
I love that you can make that so much more eloquently than I can.
I have a picture. I can share the picture.
Well, I'll tell you what, after this, please share it on Twitter with us.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, we'll do.
Do you guys find yourself like celebrating milestones in the community? Just as kind of a tack onto this question, I tend to not do it in my communities. I might do it on a yearly basis, but I don't typically celebrate things like, you know, 10,000 members, because I have found in the past that when you say, hey, we've got 10,000 members, and everybody starts glomming on to celebrate, that people get annoyed with all of the extra traffic and they stop following. And your numbers go down a couple of days after.
Well, here's the thing that I will respond to that with. If you're celebrating that milestone, you are celebrating what you are doing. If you celebrate a member, that to me is what makes the difference, right? And because if we're celebrating a person's milestone in the community, a community member's milestone, that's about them. It's not about us. And that's what I always try and focus on. So I am a big celebrator of milestones, but it's got to be the right milestones for the community members, not for the community as a whole.
Yeah, what's in it for them? What's in it for them?
Yeah, what's in it for them?
Exactly.
What's in it for them? I love celebrating. When I was leading my community earlier this year, I recognized members who really showed up, commenting, asking questions, sharing posts, you know, putting links or chatting with other members, welcoming other members. And I recognized them with, I made this big appreciation statement by putting together a bio, doing a photo, and like presenting it in the newsletter that here's our member spotlight. And I really wanted to highlight those people because it's so, at the time I was really trying to grow engagement, and anybody that was showing up in that and like over and over again, I was so grateful for, and I wanted to really make that a point to have them feel that I was really grateful for the time and the resources they were sharing. So I did a post, and then I did a actual mug. I got a printed mug made for them and sent it to them with a card. So I went like, I really wanted people to feel that this was a space where they were valued. And it doesn't have to be that extreme, like, but I really appreciate even just the, hey, shout out to our top super users this week, or the people who have been really supportive. I think it's also helpful for new people, because then they know who to follow. Then they're like, oh, these people have been around for a while, or they know, or they're really great, or not even really great people, but just like really interactive people. Like they're going to show up and they're going to comment. So I would be interested in following somebody that was going to be responsive. Yeah, that was my
good.
For me, when it comes to milestones, I kind of discussed it a little bit in the chat as well. For me, I care more about whether or not that milestone is a milestone. Is there a grander goal that someone else can hop on and work with for you, right? So if you're in a financial or like a Web3 or a crypto community, for instance, I hesitate to bring that up because lots of stuff going on, but I think it's a really great example. A lot of people there are really invested in line goes up. So if they hit a specific benchmark, there's going to be confetti. There's going to be virtual setups. There's going to be like really weird chat scripts being written. And in that way, they are participating in that community. And it's the same thing as with a influencer community. When you're working with an influencer, they do care about that number, because it does say we are this many strong, and now we're going to launch t-shirts or something along those lines to say, I'm now a part of this community. So I will celebrate a milestone if it's part of the larger goal that the community strategy has set forward, so that everyone can hop onto that bandwagon. And if there's no bandwagon, you're doing it on your own, there's no point in celebrating it at all.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, a very good point. All right, our third question. At what point should you adjust your relationship building techniques to scale with your community? Not stale. You don't want stale community growth. You want to scale with your community. For me, I've been in a situation where we had extremely rapid growth in a very short period of time. But we knew that was coming. So I was able to go into the community, and I always use the Jedi reference. I went in there and said, look, you guys are the Jedis. You've been here for a while. You know how it works. We're about to get a whole bunch of younglings and Padawans in, and you're going to have to guide them through this so that they learn the ropes and can find the rules and follow the rules. So, you know, when they ask for help them, and then explain how they can use the search button if that's what they could do. But, you know, I prepare them for that kind of rapid growth. And usually it goes pretty smoothly. But you can't always anticipate that, you know, you're going to get rapid growth, and you can't always anticipate rapid growth. So as your communities grow, what point should you start saying, okay, we can't do it the way we used to anymore? A phone call will work when you have 10 people and you can get on a Zoom. But when you have 4,000, 5,000, 10,000, 30,000, millions, it's just, you can't scale like that. So at what point should you start that change?
Ooh, Tim has something. I see Tim's looking like he has something.
Well, I think David brings up a great point. You just don't know exactly when these things are going to happen, right? But I think you start realizing that it is happening when you feel the stress on you that you can't handle it, or it's not what once worked is no longer working. And so I think, you know, as I've looked at it, it's, you know, it's like those stress moments or stress points, I guess, that you experience are the times where you need to look and see what can you do differently, right? And how can you change it to still allow your community to really grow and you know, get what they want out of the community, but maybe in a slightly different way that doesn't take its toll on you. And I mean, I'm just going to put in an example. It was like, you know, when I first started at HuffPost Live, I was in charge of support, right? And so, and in addition to our commenting and guests and helping our producers, but it was all about like, you know, how was I going to do this on top of everything else I had? And so it was like, create a form and send it out, and you know, and it was great and it was easy, and it only took me like a half an hour each day to handle everything because I had form letters that I could send out, but I was getting 0 responses, and that really wasn't helping us kind of gear how we needed to adjust our product and what we were doing with our content. And so I then changed it to me actually addressing each individual one because it wasn't that high of a volume. But then once we got up to that higher volume where I wasn't able to do it and getting all these great responses, I needed to kind of do a middle ground of the template plus a little bit of customization to get that out. And so it's just so, like those moments where you start realizing this is becoming a little bit too overwhelming for me, or I'm not seeing the same results. I think those are the points where you need to look at how can you change that. And I also really think that, you know, this is also an opportunity where you can look to certain community members to start helping with some of these areas. And I won't go too far in depth on that. So I'm going to pass it over because I see a couple other people nodding their head and wanting to jump in.
This is actually related to, so I'm planning yet another talk, and one of the big things I want to cover in that talk is called the burden of contribution, which I think has kind of existed a lot in open source, but we haven't really talked about it applying to community managers outside of the open source industry. But essentially, it's this super non-intuitive trap that a lot of people get into, the burden of contribution, where it's like the more a person contributes, the more of a super user they become. But when that person contributes, they are taking on more than just the piece of work they've taken on. They're taking on a longer term responsibility. And they may not recognize the amount of work that's being contributed to that. But simultaneously, as soon as you start to scale that amount of work, the amount of work you're capable of accomplishing is linear. The amount of reward in work that generates in your community is logarithmic. It's exponential, which means the more super users you have and the larger your community grows, the heavier the burden of the contribution for those super users. So you have to build onboarding paths that allow for other community members who aren't as close to attain mentor-mentee relationships so that you can increase the amount of super users you have sustainably and make sure that the work is limited as much as possible, and just be like, okay, this is not a thing that we are going to set a precedent for in this community at this moment, because we just don't have the community infrastructure necessary for us to support it. And it's that really, really critical limitation of saying no when the work becomes too much for the allocated work that you can accomplish.
I'll jump on the back at the end of that just by saying I think also starting with less is also helpful, because you don't need all the bells and whistles in the beginning. As you're saying, you could just do a one-to-one conversation, or you know, have those direct messages, or you know, just smaller groups of people that connect, and then just as you grow, deciding, you know, I think a lot of people want to scale too quickly. And so I see that as something too of where you lose the connection with your members if you scale too quickly. So I think starting small and realizing what you need for that time period. So when you're small, okay, what is necessary here? We don't need to like have, you know, all these kinds of tech tools when we're not needing them. But then when you get to scale bigger, okay, great. Now, what intentionally can we bring in to support us? Is that people who's on our team, who's on our community team, being like extending out to your super users or ambassador programs or things like that. Who are those people I can get on board, and how can we guide them to help them as best? And that comes down to like maybe pre-planning with some templates ahead of time, sending out, you know, some tools for those people. I think the easier you make it for them, the more they're going to be interested in it. So just sharing with them, like, here are the best 5 ways to like support our members, you know, and then giving them something like that, and pre-planning, maybe scheduling ahead content. So, you know, having some plans around, okay, we're going to have, you know, this basic format, and then let's plan ahead 3 months so that we kind of at least have some themes of what we're talking about, and what are our, can we like strategically look at that. Then we know like what are the events coming up, and it can get in a little bit more of a pre versus post, like reaction. Instead of reactionary, we're actually pre what's the word I'm looking for there? Not preventative, but it's like on the tip of my tongue anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. It kind of, the way that I process that is that there's a gap between what you're capable of doing right now, the precedent you want to set, and where you are expected to be by your community members. So your community members are up here, you're down here, and you have to set some form of precedent, plan, or process to cover that gap. And I think those are really, really good solutions, like nice little playbook worksheets that you can give to community members, a role description that allows community members to be like, yes, I want to do this thing. Those are all really, really good tools, Deb. I like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, anything to make it easier for people, for sure, and make it easier for yourself, because then you're giving them the support, but they're helping you on the back end. I think it's great. And sometimes we want to be connecting to every person, but once you get to those larger communities, that's really impossible. So what I would say to do is just focus on the trying to make like, you know, a few intentional connections each day or each week when you're in the community. Because you can't meet everybody, but you could try to see the common thread, like we started earlier, like see the common thread of like how I can connect. Oh, we're both from Pennsylvania. Oh, we're both in the same industry, or, you know, we both like knitting, or whatever random weird thing is. And connecting with those little things, I think, going back to the beginning of what we talked about around connecting with and building relationships with people, it never ends, right? Like just because we started building relationship, that'll continue, but it'll probably be on a less intense style when you're in the middle of the throes of maybe bringing in a large onboarding of maybe 10,000 people or something.
Yeah, and I want to just bring up a point for anybody listening is, in my honest opinion, not every community has to grow to a huge number, because some of the most powerful communities remain small, and there's a reason for that. And because communities aren't about how many you have, it's about the impact that it creates. And so I'm always about like not focusing on how big our community is getting. And I just want people to realize that, because it's like, sometimes I think we so focus on the big numbers because that's what everybody, their eyes get big when they see it. But what does it mean and what does it deliver to the organization is what really matters. And that's, so I just want to bring that point up, because as we talk about scaling, I just want everybody to know when we're in community, it doesn't always have to be about scaling the growth of your community or the size of your community. It's really about the impact of your community.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And there's only so many people in the world, right? Look at Facebook. They're running out of people to get on board. So their numbers are going down, right? They've got everybody. There's nobody else, right? They're only going to get so big.
Facebook is the place for everybody. Our communities, the smaller community trend is going to be the small communities where you can find your most, people that you resonate with, or you feel like they're your tribe, or however you want to define that. Those are what I see the future of community being, like these little pods. And that means not necessarily having maybe a pod of 10,000 people. Maybe you're just your best, really curated friends in a circle. That can be amazing and powerful. But I do want to jump on and just say there is a trend that I'm noticing about numbers, and people are actually removing inactive members. And I'm loving that trend, because I've had clients that said, well, Deb, we should have, 70, X number. Let's say if we don't have a high number, people are going to look at us like they're not going to want to come. I said, no, if people don't care how many other people are, at least from my perspective, people don't care how many number of people are in this space. They're more interested, like, what are the conversations? What are they talking about? Like, how is this community going to solve my problem? Or like, how can I connect with these people? They're not thinking about, oh, 10,000 people. Great. Let me go there.
Yeah. Right. I mean, they care if they're the only one. You know, if there's just that one member, they might.
If there's two, the number is two. When you're joining, then yeah, a little different.
Right. You know, about a decade ago, Angela Myers was speaking at one of my community manager on conferences, and she brought up something that made me think. And Deb, you brought this up when you were just giving your response there. She said, every member of a community must contribute fully to the community. And at first I was like, well, wait a minute, that isn't what it's the 1-9-90 rule, right? And it's like, 90% are people that are basically your lurkers or inactive. And it's like, but there is something to that, right? And different communities are all different. But I think what you brought up is a great point. You know, it's kind of like an email list, right? Just why do you want an email list with 1 million people on it if only 10 people are opening it, right? You know, and 90% of those are bad email addresses. And the community should be looked at the same way if you really want to keep a healthy community, because otherwise you're going to, create, people that are just seeing less and less value because the numbers are growing, but nothing's happening. And that's like, I'm so glad you brought that up, Deb. It's a really good point.
I think it increases the value of the community when you tell me as a, community member and you're the leader and you're saying, hey, we're just going to keep people active. If you're not active in 90 days, we are going to remove you. That makes me feel better because then people are actually showing up and in real time, which is what I like in a community, right? Not to have to stumble on posts that are a year or 3 years old and feel like it's, there's nothing really happening here recently.
I would also like to add that this shouldn't just be a trend in your members, right? Because if you think about it, kind of going back to that same email list issue, if you don't add negatives to your onboarding and offboarding processes, if you don't add those negatives, then they can't raise their hands and say, hey, this isn't what I thought it was. I'd like to go, right? So that's really critical, crucial, important information. But for 90% of communities and companies, that's dark data because all they want is the positive information. They throw away this negative statement of, I'd like to put my hand down. And when you have that automation infrastructure that says, hey, after a certain period of time, obviously you're disinterested in this particular asset, we're going to bump you back using the orbit model to a wider circle, right? That information now tells you where exactly that lead is, and you can move them into other parts of the community that might be more valuable to them. If you do remove your community members who are not active, you now, by definition, have a second action that you can take, which says, what went wrong? Why did you join this community? If it didn't really work out, what were you looking for? Is this something that we can provide for you? And you can rely not just on your community metrics, but your marketing data for that. That tells you so much about your product, your offering, everything else next to it. And then at a certain point in time, once they are satisfied, maybe they'll come back stronger than they've ever been to your community.
Well said. Well said. I know in our community, we deactivate people after a period of time. And to reactivate, it's as easy as logging in, basically. But they'll stop getting the emails and stuff like that so that we're not pumping information to people that just don't want it. So, all right. Shout out to Dom Garrett, who joined us, and Jeffrey Rowe, who have been in the chat. Next question. How have you been able to connect with your community beyond the one-on-one conversations that you may have online?
Should we say the big elephant in the room is physical cohort-based events?
I mean, there's that. Yeah.
Like this.
Well, this isn't physical. I mean, but this is a good example. You know, Tim started the trend of getting community managers together to talk about what we do, and you know, I've carried that on now, and he's still here, so it's not like he's gone. But so you know, But yeah, I think that this is a good example. I think that just getting people in a room together sometimes is the easiest way to do it. There is a community manager in our community who does something called Between Two Water Coolers. Yeah, and basically what they do, and I'll remember to tweet out a plug for that if anybody's interested in it, is that basically he opens up a Zoom call, and Zoom has the ability to kind of section people off into little breakout rooms, and he'll take everybody that's there and he'll break everybody out into rooms of 2 people for 5 minutes. So you get like one-on-one time with somebody completely random. And, he'll do it, I think 2 or 3 times. And you might get the same person twice, and you might not. You might get 3 different people. But it gives you a chance to talk to somebody else. I don't think 5 minutes is long enough. That's my feedback on that. Because about the time you figure out who you're talking to and what they do, it's time to go to the next room. And you don't get to expand upon it. But it's good. It's good to get that, one-on-one contact in a group setting almost, is exactly what that is. And I liked that when I joined it. But this is my favorite.
Bring a big group of people together and then break them into one-on-one.
I know, we're talking about getting past the one-on-one, but here we go. We're going to bring you all together and shove you off into one-on-ones. But I think that it's still a group experience. And there's that time between the breakout rooms where you can talk and contribute and say stuff. But these kind of things, I love these kind of things. Clearly, I love these kind of things. I'm going through the torture of running one. It's not torture. It's a joke. But it takes work and effort to set something like this up. And I find that there's enough value in doing this that it's worth it to put that time and effort in. And I didn't know Deb. I didn't know Vina a month ago, and now I do. And I know that, what their world is about. And so if someone comes to me and says, hey, I'm looking to start a community and I need some help with that, I now have a list of people that I can send them to and say, well, you can check here, here, and here, and each of you has a different take on how to get it done. And, with me doing just a little bit of questioning of that person, I can better direct them. But that would not happen if we didn't come together as a group once a week and talk like this.
Two things I'll say. Pablo Gonzalez, one of my faves, he always shows up really big and bold and makes impressions and really uses that leverage of first impressions, and then takes the initiative later to, once he's built a relationship and he knows me really well, for example, be like, oh my gosh, you're going to meet Deb. Whenever somebody is talking with him and he comes up and then he thinks about people that he can connect with this person he's talking to, and relate it back. And so I think that's a good tool, is that relating and connector kind of a role. But also you mentioned a little bit around in person or bringing people together in groups. And I'll tell you my experience in my first online community that I was an active member in was a community focused on location independence, and trying to become, quit my 9-to-5 job to become a location independent in 2017, 2018. And one of the things, the way I started in there was like in a course and trying to take all these, courses on the weekends and side hustling it and all that kind of stuff. But then I connected with people inside the virtual community. And what happened was 6 months after that, I connected with them in person at a place in Denver. But by then I had built these relationships with them. So when we showed up in person, it was like hugging, somebody that I'd been working with for forever, it seemed like, because we had been building these relationships. So I think as you grow in scale and you can do things like in person, I think those are amazing opportunities because they really do create magical bonds. So if there is an opportunity at some point to do that, but I think it's also sharing, collaborating, right? Like once you're building relationships and you find out like somebody is in the same space as you that does different things, or is in a complementary role of, oh, I don't do, copywriting, but Deb does. So you could do, you should connect with her. And that's how you kind of that referrals and networking. And I think those are the ways to also like elevate each other as community members too, because then you're already saying, oh, somebody here is in the space and they can talk right to that and let me connect you. So anyway, I'll stop.
Absolutely.
Tim is like waiting on bated breath again.
Well, no, I mean, you know, in my mind, like one of the simplest things I've seen is like, and I kind of learned this from, you know, when I read Adam Grant's Give and Take. There was another Adam in there, I forget his last name, who talked about the 5-minute favor, right? And what he would always say is, I'd do anything for anybody if it doesn't take me more than 5 minutes. And I think when we look at community building, it's like, you know, one of the things that taught me was if I get asked something 3 times, I don't know why it's like 3 is my magic number. I just realized that instead of answering it for the 4th time, I'm going to do something with it. Right. And so I'd write a blog post or I'd write an email about it or, you know, whatever it was. But in community building, I think what it comes down to is, you know, like if you can't have one-on-one conversations because, you know, it gets a little bit, you know, too much of a burden on your time, think about doing an AMA where you just set aside an hour and anybody in the community can come in, or maybe you segment it into certain groups of your community, different level of community members can come in because maybe you want to share certain information with like your super users in your community, but the general public in your community maybe gets a slightly watered down version of that, you know, but that's a great way. Anybody that's interested in it in the community can show up and it's only taking 1 hour of your time instead of you having to have, you know, hundreds or thousands or millions of 1-hour conversations with your community members. And so those to me are like one of the best ways to go about, you know, connecting with more community members beyond just the one-on-one, but still being effective at communicating the information that we want within the community.
Agreed. Yeah, one of the communities the same community I was talking about had expert sessions where, you know, it's a global community and it was a travel focused community. So when the topic came up about, let's talk about Berlin, people could talk about that because they've been there. They can share all their tips for like, if you're going to go to Berlin for the first time, and elevating those community members who have those different experiences or backgrounds, you know, not only helps you like create more content, like they're creating the content, right? You're elevating them and they're creating the content instead of you creating the content, but it also gives the members a chance to get to know that member more. So I think it does so many things when you have events that are like led by community led events are what I really love.
Yeah. And I'm going to do it again. I'm so sorry. But I also feel like the structures that we're talking about, the ability to move people into specific frameworks where they are colliding and talking, that is the very definition of community, right? It's about producing collisions that will end up happening over and over and over again to create a growth cycle that has something at the end of it. And I feel like if we spend more time learning on a small group communication scale, what a deliberative framework could look like for our communities, because that's what these are, right? They are frameworks for improving deliberative sessions, places where people will talk about one another at first about a topic, but then they'll start to widen that topic. And understanding the nature of a deliberative conversation in which you have a growth of conversation and possibilities, things are really, really creative. And then understanding the importance of the grown zone, the place where people do collide and have conversations, have differing opinions, that generates incredible amounts of content. So it's not just about, hey, let's all get together and be really, really nice and have those conversations. It's about that small group grown zone, creating more capacity for voice, more share of voice, more diversity, more connection, more interaction. But at the end of it all, it's up to the facilitator. It's up to the key stakeholders to bring that conversation into an action, some form of elucidated artifact that records the discussion, shows that it matters, produces something that people are able to bounce off of, and generates yet another deliberative discussion. And once we understand how those frameworks work and what the nature of that small group communication looks like, we'll definitely be able to cause those collisions to happen purposefully, consistently, and regularly enough to have community grow and still mean something.
Yep. That's good.
Sorry.
No, you're good. It's perfectly fine. You bring the science, and I bring the comedy. I'm not very funny, but
I think you're plenty hilarious. I think.
Oh, well, thank you. You don't need to butter me up. You're welcome back anytime.
Like next week.
That's right.
Tim is the Tim and David are the funniest people I've ever met in my whole life.
All
Butter
right.
him up like a
We need to get you out more, Deb.
Yes, we do. We need to. You should come on more shows just so we can introduce you to other people. You know? So, all right. So we've got a few minutes left. I don't want to pop up another question. We actually this question, we answered the next question that I have, which was, would you consider virtual or live events a good way to bring people together? I think we agree that yes, they are a good way to bring people together. And we covered a lot of that. So any final thoughts? I guess I'll give it to you. Just everything that we covered today, you've got a couple of minutes here just to talk about it, and then we'll say our goodbyes.
I think collaborations are really a fun thing, a fun way to think about other ways to connect for, beyond the one-on-one. Like, none of us want to do things alone. So collaborating, whether it's a co-working session that you're joining or hosting, or it's a project you're working on, or maybe even just getting a buddy to keep you more accountable with working out or something like that. Those kinds of, or getting like a small, 2 or 3 people even, together. I think those are all fun ways to connect. I think that as you scale and grow, those things changed and they look different, like the virtual events or, a larger conference or something like that. But I think, talking about building relationships, which is where the talk started, is really just about being authentic and showing up and being present. I think the biggest key, tip that I would give people is just be present when you're with people so that you can really retain and get to know those people better. I think the biggest challenge we have as humans right now is that there's so many distractions, and that really prohibits us from really connecting more intentionally with the people we're with, whether it's in this space virtually or it's an in-person space. So I think building relationships, just be more intentional around who you're connecting with, the purpose, and if there's outcomes. Sometimes there's outcomes, sometimes it's just like, no, we're just hanging out, and all of those things are okay.
I would definitely say that intentionality is the most critical part here, right? Understanding how people interact naturally allows you to replicate those functions to produce community growth. So I would definitely echo that particular one. I don't know. I also think it's really important to understand that there's parts of community that you can't control, and you need to let that happen. The whole point is to have a well-structured nucleus so that you don't have to care about what the rest of the cell is doing. You could just let them go off and do their thing and live their best lives and be awesome about it.
I was going to say the Community Roundtable has a shirt that says control is for amateurs.
I love it. Oh, I love it. Oh, that's great.
I actually have one in my closet. So. But no, I think 2 things that I want to leave are, one is that I think whenever you can give, whether it's your entire community or a segment of your community, however you want to define that segment, kind of a behind the scenes look at what you're doing so that they feel a part of creating what's being created is a huge thing to really get them vested and invested in your community. The other thing too, and I don't think we touched on this, but getting to know your community members beyond just them being in the community is so important. I mean, I remember once we had one of our community members come up and say, let us know that one of the other community members was in the hospital and she was going to be there for at least a week. And, I went to my boss and I said, hey, so-and-so, I just learned is going to be in the hospital for a week. She's not doing well, and he goes, see if you can get her hospital, her room number, and we used anonymous names. So I needed to get her actual name, and let's send her flowers. And, you know, so I reached out to this community member, got all that information. We sent her flowers. Now, we didn't publicize this in the community. We didn't, you know, cast the light on us. We were purely doing it because we cared about this community member. But as a result, what happened was all those community members talked amongst themselves, not even in the community, but just they all had connections. And it just made the bond to let them know that we really cared about them as individuals and people, not just as community members. And so I really think when you build relationships, it's really about going beyond what they can do for you. It's about really getting to know them and caring about them personally, as well as what they can contribute to you.
Yeah. Unexpected gifts at unexpected times. Very powerful way of connecting with people. That's my opinion on that. All right. So we've got 2 minutes left. What we'll do is I'll start with Vina. We'll go to Deb. We'll hit Tim, and I'll finish it out. But just tell everyone who you are, how they can get in touch with you, your websites, your blogs, your podcasts, whatever it is, YouTube channel, so that they can get in touch with you and learn more from you if they want, or if they want to hire you, because some of you, like to be hired. So Vina, you go first.
Yeah, so I am an online community architect, but I also focus primarily on education. So the best ways to get in contact with me would be to join my completely free Discord community. It's available at my website, sociallyconstructed.online. And if you don't want to be a part of an active community, totally get it. You got to spend your time where it's wisest, right? So you can always subscribe to my YouTube channel, where I basically put all of our community going ons into really well structured educational snippets. So you can go to Socially Constructed Online for the YouTube channel there. And otherwise, my Twitter is Samantha Venia. So that's probably where you can reach me. And I am available for hire as well. So there.
Woo! Nice. And Venia's just started joining us in the Community Consultants Collective. This is a group I lead for consultants that we've been meeting consistently for a year, and we are now getting more formal. So we are looking at bringing on a board of advisors, and then we're going to have a little bit more formality with our community consultant mastermind.
I just want to plug real quick that on the 21st, we're doing a topic on community consultants, hiring and such.
Am I there? Did you invite me to that one?
I certainly will now.
Okay, so make sure you invited me, because I don't remember if it's on my calendar. But if
I don't think it is, but I'll get it on there. So.
Yeah. No, but so yeah, for sure. Findcalmhere.com is where you can find me. I'm on LinkedIn the most. I typically post there. I help creators, authors, leaders, speakers, founders who want to, maybe scale their business, maybe just start that, move that Facebook group to a different platform. Maybe my specialty is with Mighty Networks, but helping people with lots of other places, and more about community building basis is where I'm focused on with the book I'm writing, which is Creator to Community Builder. And so that is currently something I'm working on. So if you find yourself feeling like, I don't know where to start to build a community and what that looks like to launch it and all those kinds of things, that's what's going to be in this new book that I'm working on writing. It's called Creator to Community Builder. And you can find out more at findcalmhere.com and follow me on LinkedIn.
Very
awesome.
Good.
And I'm Tim McDonald at TA McDonald on Twitter. And you can, I'm the head of community at Homeroom. So you can find us at homeroom.club.
Yeah, and I'm David Dewald at Sienna and community manager at Sienna. You can also hit me on the communitymanager.com, hit the contact us page if you would like to be on the show, or you have a topic that you'd like us to cover, or both. That would be good, both. Quick shout out to Dave Coleman and Dom Garrett, Jeffrey Rowe, our chatters today, who sent in questions and comments. We appreciate you. I want to thank our guests and my co-host Tim McDonald for joining us today. And thank you to our audience. If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, and follow on the platform of your choice. If you would like to be a guest on our show, like I said, you can head over to the communitymanager.com, click About Us, and the Contact Us page. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. And I'll see you guys next week. Next week, speaking of, we're going to be talking to Adrian Spire. He just wrote a book. It just came out, The Accidental Community Manager. We're doing an AMA. I know Vinia's going to be there for that. If you've read the book, have questions for Adrian, please join us. If you'd like to be on screen, let us know. We'll get you on screen. But thank you, everybody. Have a great Friday, and we'll see you next week.